Usually when we think about riding a bike, we picture this incredibly simple, innate human ability.
Right, like walking.
Yeah, exactly. Like walking, you learn it once as a kid, the training wheels come off, and the physical act is just burned into your muscle memory forever.
It feels like second nature.
Right. You're either pedaling or you're falling. It feels entirely binary.
Well, it's a comforting illusion, really,
Hmm.
because underneath that fluid, seemingly automatic motion is this massive landscape of biomechanics.
And neurobiology.
Yes, and sports science. It's all vastly more complex than just keeping your balance. I mean, the gap between merely turning the pedals and understanding how that action fundamentally rewires your human machinery
Yeah.
is just massive.
And that is exactly why we are jumping into this today. We've got a great stack of sources for you on this deep dive.
We do. We're looking at transcripts from both beginner and advanced cycling videos. So everything from indoor workouts to really deep dives into sports science.
Plus, we have this comprehensive blog on the health benefits of cycling and a really fascinating clinical experiment on brain activity during exercise.
Yeah, the brain scan data is incredible.
So the goal of this deep dive isn't just to tell you how to ride a bike. We want to deconstruct the biomechanics, the training science, and the surprising neuroscience of how cycling literally changes the shape of your body.
And the function of your brain.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to explore how cycling alters your brain chemistry or pushes your VO2 max, we really need to establish the foundational biomechanics.
Right. You cannot unlock high-end physiological performance if your physical form is, actively destroying your knees.
Yeah, if the chassis is out of alignment, the size of the engine becomes entirely irrelevant.
Exactly. You have to build the mechanical foundation first.
So let's look at that foundation, starting right from the ground up. When you analyze the mechanics of an indoor training session versus riding out on the pavement, there's this fascinating overlap in how the body interacts with the machine.
Especially with indoor instructors.
Yeah, like Kaylee Cohen, she gives these highly specific indoor cycling cues. Things like keeping your shoulders down away from your ears, maintaining flat feet, and engaging the core.
But the cue that's really crucial there is pushing and pulling the pedals simultaneously.
Yes, that one really caught my attention.
Because that push-pull dynamic is like the ultimate differentiator between a novice and a truly efficient rider. Most casual riders just mash downward.
They're entirely quad dominant.
Right. But when you maintain a flat foot, meaning your ankle isn't collapsing or pointing severely downward,
Yeah.
and you engage your core for stability, you can actually utilize the upstroke.
Oh, I see.
You're actively recruiting your hamstrings and your hip flexors to unweight the pedal on the way up. It distributes the muscular load across the entire upper leg rather than just isolating it.
That makes perfect sense for efficiency. But then, you transition that indoor form to the unpredictable environment of outdoor riding, and you run into the physics of the actual road.
Which changes everything.
Right. Tristan, who focuses heavily on outdoor biomechanics in our sources, adds a really crucial element to this: resistance.
Yes, mechanical resistance.
He points out that you must have enough mechanical resistance on the pedals to avoid bouncing in the saddle. So what is actually happening in the joint if you're just spinning wildly in too light of a gear?
Well, when you lack adequate resistance in your drivetrain, your muscles are no longer acting as shock absorbers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the kinetic energy from that rapid, uncontrolled leg movement has to go somewhere, and it ends up being transferred directly into the ligaments and cartilage of the knee.
That sounds painful.
It is. You essentially lose neuromuscular control of the pedal stroke at the bottom of the revolution. That creates micro impacts in the joint, literally thousands of times an hour.
Jeez. And speaking of the mechanics of the bike itself, there are some highly specific, almost quirky engineering details that play into this.
Oh, you mean the pedals?
Yes. I was amazed to learn that the left-hand pedal on a bicycle is reverse-threaded, meaning to loosen it, you actually have to twist it to the right.
It's a brilliant, completely counterintuitive piece of mechanical engineering. It solves a phenomenon called mechanical precession.
Mechanical precession.
Right. So if the left pedal had a standard thread, the microscopic bearing friction combined with the forward motion of your pedaling would slowly unscrew the pedal arm straight out of the crank while you were riding.
Oh, wow. So your pedal would just fall off in the middle of a ride.
Exactly. Reversing the thread uses that exact same physics to constantly tighten the pedal instead. It prevents catastrophic failure on the road.
Even if it deeply confuses anyone trying to swap their pedals in their garage for the first time.
Yeah, it's a nightmare for beginners. Which is why one of the sources suggested practicing clipping in and out inside your kitchen before ever hitting the road.
Hold on to the kitchen counter and just practice clicking your shoes in and out. That's great advice. And once you're actually moving, those micro-mechanical adjustments just keep coming, like taking corners, for example.
Quartering clearance is huge.
Right. The cardinal rule is keeping your outside pedal down when you lean into a turn. Because if you keep the inside pedal down, it strikes the ground as you lean, lifting your wheels off the pavement, and you just crash instantly.
It's an instant wipeout.
But I want to push back on one mechanical concept that comes up a lot regarding gear shifting. This idea of cross-chaining.
Cross-chaining.
Yeah. This is when you use the largest gear on the front chainring and the largest gear on the rear cassette at the exact same time. Is cross-chaining basically like trying to drive a manual transmission car on the highway while stuck in second gear?
I would actually take that analogy a step further.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is like driving that manual transmission car in second gear while simultaneously bending the drive shaft at a severe angle.
Oh, geez.
Because in both cases, you're fundamentally fighting the machine's intended mechanical advantage. By putting the chain on the biggest ring up front and the biggest in the back, you are forcing the metal chain to stretch diagonally across the bike.
So you're introducing lateral stress.
Immense lateral stress. A bicycle chain is designed to transfer power efficiently in a straight line. When you cross-chain, the metal plates of the chain are literally grinding against the teeth of the gears at an angle.
Which just ruins the bike.
It causes premature wear on your entire drivetrain. It creates friction that literally steals wattage from your legs, and it vastly increases the chance of the chain snapping under heavy load.
But why does all this micromanagement matter for you, the listener? I mean, we're talking about pedaling in circles and which gear to pick.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, mastering these small technical details like knowing your cornering clearance or instinctively shifting into an easier gear before you hit a steep climb, it's fundamentally about cognitive load.
Right. You don't want to be overthinking it.
Exactly. When these mechanical habits become completely automated in your basal ganglia, it frees up your conscious mental bandwidth. You're no longer thinking about how to ride the bike.
And you are going to need every ounce of that mental bandwidth for the profound physiological suffering required to force the adaptations we're talking about next.
Absolutely.
Which brings us right into the engine room. Now that the biomechanics are dialed in and we aren't shredding our knees or our drivetrains, how do you actually get faster?
We have to transition from basic endurance to the deep science of high-intensity interval training, HIIT.
But let's establish the health baseline first, because looking at the population data from the blog, it is just staggering.
It really is.
They cited a recent meta-analysis of over 2.6 million participants. It found that recreational cycling reduces all-cause mortality by 21% and cardiovascular mortality by 20%.
I mean, it is arguably one of the most profound accessible health interventions we have. Consistent, low-impact aerobic volume just dramatically remodels your cardiovascular system.
Like increasing stroke volume. Right.
Meaning your heart pumps more blood per beat, and it builds capillary density in the muscles. But the biological reality is that the body is an incredibly stubborn machine.
It gets used to the work.
Exactly. It adapts to that baseline stress very quickly. So if you want to push past a fitness plateau, volume alone eventually offers diminishing returns. You have to introduce severe intensity.
Wait, I want to clarify something here, because I was digging into the sports science data on interval training, specifically the research compiled by Dylan Johnson.
Oh yeah, the interval studies.
Yeah, I read about this highly publicized study that claimed 30-second maximum effort intervals were vastly superior to 5-minute intervals for building power. It seemed definitive, but Dylan's analysis completely threw it out. Why are we discarding that study?
Because the methodology was entirely skewed. It made it an apples to oranges comparison. The researchers didn't account for the inherent limits of human energy systems.
How so?
Well, in that study, the group doing the short 30-second intervals averaged an output of 441 watts. But the group doing the 5-minute intervals only averaged 368 watts.
Okay, so the short group pushed more power.
Right. And the conclusion was that the shorter intervals built more fitness. But the researchers failed to recognize that as an interval duration increases, power output biologically must decrease.
Oh, of course. You can't sprint for 5 minutes.
Exactly. You cannot physically hold 30-second sprint wattage for 5 unbroken minutes. The 30-second group was tapping into their anaerobic energy system using stored ATP and creatine phosphate, while the 5-minute group was relying heavily on their aerobic system.
So they weren't testing which interval was better at all.
No. They were testing two entirely different physiological pathways.
So they were essentially punishing the 5-minute group for the biological reality of pacing.
Precisely.
But when you control for that pacing, the data tells a totally different story. Look at the famous sweet spot study from Stephen Seiler.
Oh, that's a classic.
He tested 3 different protocols, right? 4 by 4-minute intervals, 4 by 8-minute intervals, and 4 by 16-minute intervals. He was trying to find the ultimate balance of effort and adaptation.
And the winner was the 4 by 8-minute interval.
Right. It yielded the absolute highest physiological gains for the pain endured. Though the sources did note that for total beginners, doing something like Tabata training, which is 30 seconds of maximum effort, followed by 30 seconds of rest, can create a substantial positive response in just 6 sessions before the body plateaus.
Right. Beginners respond to almost any intense stimulus initially.
But I have to stop here because the rate of perceived exertion data from Seiler's study, the RPE data, left me completely confused.
Yeah. The psychological component of pacing is where the raw data meets human fallibility.
Exactly. Wait, why did the subjects rate the short 4-minute intervals as harder mentally than the massive 16-minute intervals? Intuitively, 16 minutes of agonizing effort should feel worse than 4 minutes.
What's fascinating here is the concept of intensity scaling and how the brain actually processes chemical distress. Remember, the goal of these intervals isn't just to survive them.
Right, you have to maximize the output.
Exactly. It's to average the absolute highest possible power for that specific duration.
Okay.
Because 4 minutes is a relatively short window, you are forced to ride at a wildly high intensity.
We're surfing the red line.
You're surfing the absolute red line of your VO2 max, which
Yeah.
is the maximum rate at which your body can absorb and utilize oxygen.
So your muscles are literally demanding more oxygen than your lungs can possibly deliver to them.
Precisely. And when that happens, your body switches to anaerobic metabolism to make up the energy deficit. The byproduct of that is a massive accumulation of lactic acid and hydrogen ions in the muscle tissue.
Oh, so that's the burn.
That's the burn. The environment becomes highly acidic. Pacing a 4-minute effort requires you to intentionally flood your system with acid and just sit there.
And your brain just rejects that.
The central nervous system essentially panics. It struggles much more to pace a short, maximal, highly acidic effort than it does a longer, sustained threshold effort, like a 16-minute interval.
Because in the 16-minute one, you're hovering just below that lactate accumulation point.
Exactly. You're not flooding the system in the same way.
So the 8-minute interval sits right in the middle of those two extremes.
It is the biological sweet spot. 8 minutes is long enough to force massive adaptations in your aerobic capacity and mitochondrial density, but it requires a pacing strategy that keeps you just shy of totally overwhelming your central nervous system with those metabolic byproducts.
Okay, so if 8-minute intervals at the threshold of physical agony are the limit of what the brain will voluntarily tolerate, how does a normal person with, a 9-to-5 job actually fit this kind of intense programming into a standard week?
That's the real challenge.
Yeah. We're moving from how to train to when to train, specifically this trend of riding twice a day. Is splitting your workouts into 2 shorter sessions actually going to make you faster than just going out for one long endurance ride on the weekend?
The science here ventures into how our cells manage their internal pantries, specifically muscle glycogen, which is the carbohydrate stored directly within the muscle tissue for immediate energy access.
Right. And this brings up the concept of train high, sleep low.
Yes.
So the protocol is that you train in the evening with high glycogen stores, meaning you've eaten plenty of carbs. Then you intentionally withhold carbohydrates after the workout, go to sleep, wake up, and train low the next morning.
Right. Your muscles are essentially depleted of their primary fuel source before you even start pedaling.
What is the biological mechanism here? Like, what does training depleted actually force the muscle to do?
Well, when a muscle cell is forced to contract repeatedly without its preferred, easily accessible fuel, glycogen, it triggers a deep cellular stress response. It activates an enzyme pathway called AMPK, which is essentially the body's metabolic master switch.
So the cell is freaking out.
The cell panics. It realizes it needs to become more efficient at utilizing other fuel sources. The studies show that these 2-a-day glycogen-depleted sessions force an increase in mitochondrial efficiency.
The powerhouses of the cell.
Exactly. The mitochondria get better at producing ATP, the currency of cellular energy. Furthermore, the body vastly increases its whole body fat oxidation rates. Because it doesn't have carbs, it learns to break down lipid stores for fuel much more effectively.
Okay, I'm going to push back on this because it sounds totally miserable.
Oh, it is.
This sounds like forcing your smartphone to run a dozen complex background apps while it's sitting at 1% battery just to see if you can train the processor to be tougher. I mean, is this just self-torture?
It kind of is.
Especially because the data shows that when researchers actually tested these train-low athletes in a 1-hour time trial race, their performance didn't actually improve any more than the group just doing normal, fully fueled long rides.
The smartphone analogy is highly accurate. And just like a phone running at 1% battery, if you do it constantly, the overall health of the system degrades.
Oh, so it backfires.
It can. Training in a depleted state creates massive systemic fatigue. It raises cortisol levels and suppresses the immune system. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the cellular signaling adaptations from training on low glycogen are real under a microscope. But translating that to actual speed on the road is highly debatable.
So what's the point for regular people?
For the average rider, or even the advanced amateur, the real tangible benefit of riding twice a day has absolutely nothing to do with glycogen depletion or cellular panic.
Then what is the actual benefit of doing 2-a-days?
Pure time management.
Ah.
Yeah. Endurance sports require volume to build the aerobic base. If your professional or family schedule simply does not allow for a continuous 4-hour ride on a Tuesday, splitting that volume into 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening is a highly practical compromise.
That makes a lot of sense.
You maintain the weekly volume required for cardiovascular remodeling without needing to sacrifice half of your day.
And how do we factor strength training into that time-crunched schedule? Because the consensus across the board in the sources is that every cyclist needs to be lifting weights to maintain bone density and raw power.
It entirely depends on the season and your immediate goals. The biological rule is simple. Whichever workout you perform first in the day is the one that will receive the highest quality neuromuscular recruitment.
Because your central nervous system is fresh.
Exactly. So during the winter base season, when building raw muscular strength and durability is the priority, you should lift weights first, then ride later.
Okay.
But as you transition into peak race season, your high-intensity cycling intervals, those brutal 8-minute efforts we talked about, those must take priority. Do the cycling intervals first and lift in an already fatigued state later in the day.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've deconstructed the mechanical pedal stroke to save our knees, we've broken down the biochemistry of 8-minute intervals and lactate accumulation, and we've organized the weekly volume to fit a busy life.
We've covered the body pretty thoroughly.
We have. But here is the ultimate payoff of this entire deep dive. What is all of this profound physical suffering actually doing to the brain?
This is the frontier where sports science crosses over into cognitive neuroscience, and the data paints a picture of a brain being fundamentally rewired by exertion.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the baseline mental health data first. Researchers analyzed data from 1.2 million Americans, largely driven by work from Sami Checkroud in Oxford's psychiatry department.
It's a massive data set.
Huge. And they found that cyclists experienced 21.6% fewer days of poor mental health in a given month compared to the baseline. In fact, exercisers generally have 40% fewer poor mental health days than non-exercisers.
And cycling specifically ranked as the #2 best activity for mental health across the entire population.
Sitting right behind team sports.
Right. And the data doesn't just show that more is better either. They pinpointed a specific optimal dose for neurological benefit. It's 45 minutes of exertion, 3 to 5 times a week.
Just 45 minutes.
Yeah. Anything beyond that didn't yield additional mental health benefits. And extreme volume actually correlated with increased mental fatigue.
Which tracks perfectly with the time-crunched cycling schedule we just discussed. And it's amplified when you take that 45 minutes outdoors.
Oh, absolutely. The environment matters.
You look at the mental health boosts of riding scenic trails mentioned in the blog, like grinding up the 165-mile Tahoe Rim Trail to Relay Peak at over 10,000 feet, or navigating the flowy backcountry single track in Stanley, Idaho. The environmental exposure compounds the physical benefit.
It really does.
But it forces the classic chicken or egg question. Do happy, well-adjusted people just naturally gravitate toward riding bikes, or does the physical act of riding bikes manufacture happiness?
This raises an important question, and it's a limitation of population-level surveys. They show correlation, but they struggle to prove mechanism.
Right.
However, this is exactly where clinical neuroscience provides the missing link. The Global Cycling Network partnered with Oxford University to run a live clinical experiment to see exactly how cycling changes brain chemistry in real time.
Tell me about the scan. They used a near-infrared spectroscopy scanner, a NIRS device, right?
Yes, an NRS cap.
From the video, it looks like a high-tech, wire-covered shower cap.
It does. NIRS technology uses light to measure the concentration of oxygenated versus deoxygenated hemoglobin in the brain. It literally allows researchers to watch blood flow shift across different cortical regions in real time as the rider is pedaling.
Wow.
So they had the cyclist progress through various intensities, eventually pushing them up to a near VO2 max effort, holding roughly 425 watts.
425 watts is a massive, agonizing physical output. I mean, your legs are screaming, your lungs are burning. What did the NIRS scan show happening inside the skull at that exact moment?
Well, when you're pedaling gently, your brain has an abundance of oxygen and resources. It uses those resources to run what neuroscientists call the default mode network.
Okay, the DMN.
You can think of it as the internal hamster wheel of the mind. It's the network responsible for rumination, projecting into the future, stressing about work, and replaying past anxieties.
Basically the source of all modern anxiety.
Precisely. But when you push the human body to a 425-watt effort, the sheer physiological demand for oxygen overrides everything else.
Yeah.
The NIRS scan visually demonstrated the brain aggressively reallocating oxygenated blood.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Because there is a finite amount of blood in the skull, the brain forcefully funnels it away from the default mode network and pushes it entirely into the motor cortex and the goal-directed centers of the frontal lobe.
That is wild.
The brain literally prioritizes the immediate survival task of keeping the legs moving over the luxury of worrying about tomorrow.
It is chemically starving the anxiety centers.
It powers them down completely because
Yeah.
it no longer has the oxygen to sustain those abstract thoughts. You are quite literally achieving a profound and forced state of mindfulness, not through quiet meditation, but through absolute physical exhaustion.
The rumination stops because the biology demands it.
Exactly.
That is an incredible mechanism. So to recap the journey we've been on today, we started by mastering the mechanical basics, understanding the physics of reverse threaded pedals, and cross-chaining to reduce cognitive load.
Getting the form right.
Right. Then we dove into the biochemistry of the engine room, discovering why 8-minute intervals are the ultimate biological sweet spot for adapting without overwhelming the central nervous system.
We navigated the realities of glycogen depletion and the actual benefits of two-a-days for the busy athlete.
And ultimately, we learned how to use the bicycle as a neurological tool to forcefully redirect blood flow and silence the anxious mind.
It is a complete holistic transformation. From the micromechanics of pushing and pulling the pedal all the way to the reallocation of oxygen in the frontal lobe.
It really is.
And when you look at the totality of that data, it leaves us with something quite profound to consider.
What's that?
Well, we spend vast amounts of time and resources in modern society trying to meditate, therapy, or medicate away our chronic stress. But looking at how the brain fundamentally shuts down the anxiety networks during a 425-watt sprint, it makes you wonder.
Wonder what?
How much of our modern psychological distress is simply a symptom of our bodies rarely being pushed to their absolute physical limits?
Wow. Are we chronically anxious simply because we've forgotten how to physically suffer on a bike? I absolutely love that thought. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. We hope you take these biomechanical insights, the interval science, and that a final, profound question into your next ride.
Get out there and push some watts.
Exactly. Whether you are clipping in on a trainer in your living room or heading out to push those watts on the open road, keep pedaling and we'll catch you next time.